Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. All right, we're going to talk about today the status quo on the Temple Mount. And Jordan is outraged after an Israeli minister calls for a new Temple Mount status quo. So as we see the ever-changing face and opinion of Jews about the Temple Mount and gaining traction in terms of building the third temple, this is an article about, just another voice putting their opinions in there about changing the current status quo, changing what is happening on the Temple Mount, looking towards getting more Jews up there, looking towards the rebuilding of a third temple. First, a couple of things I want to take a look at, just as a heads up. This is an interesting one. Well, let's go to this one here. First one, record-breaking hailstone in Colorado. Big hail like this can easily kill people, it says. And so what are they talking about? Well, monster hail was falling in Colorado, and it reminds me of things, the wrath of God that has happened in quote-unquote biblical times. And I don't know that biblical times ever just refers to times spoken of in the Bible. I think we're living in biblical times, pretty incredible times. And this has happened. The hailstones, you can see in the image there, they're about 4.83 inches in diameter, about the same, larger, in fact, than the size of a DVD. Monster hail fell from the sky in hammered areas of the central United States Tuesday, shattering a state record. Earlier Tuesday, before the storms developed, the AccuWeather warned that Colorado's state hail record could be in jeopardy given the intensity of the storms. So these are hailstones getting up to biblical proportion sizes, I think. Here's a look at the actual hail that fell. I'm verifying what looks to be a new record for hailstones. And look at the hailstones. They're pointed almost. You get much bigger than that, and these things start falling on people's heads, and you can understand some of the destruction, some of the wrath on the people in biblical times, if you will, that was brought upon the world due to the sin of the world. A couple of comments here. One person says, I heard a kind of bang and thought someone hit the truck. The truck started rocking, and we have large hail coming down, it says. So I think we're going to see more and more of this in the last days. And along that theme of more and more incredible environmental things happening, which again harkens back to the wrath of biblical times. And I think the whole climate change discussion, I think the climate is changing. I don't think it's man-made, and I think it's more like a standard fluctuation in the climate of the world. And God uses that according to his purposes. And so we're heading back into a time of significant climate fluctuation. But I think it's something that has happened in the past, and also that God will use it in these last days. And this is going to be part of the wrath. He uses his creation to bring about wrath upon the sin of the world, just like happened with Noah's flood. That wasn't some supernatural event. That was a worldwide flood event. And so that's proof that God uses his natural creation to judge the world. And this can be seen as a forerunner, something that could be coming upon the world. Look at this one, Bloomberg.com, and just before we get to the Temple Mount update here. Don't be lulled by a quiet June and July. The real Atlantic hurricane season is about to kick off, and they're saying it's backloaded. This is from August 14th. So the suggestion is that this is going to be a significant storm season. A storm season of biblical proportions. I think all part of the birth pains, the growing birth pains, the growing troubles. This is going to add to the famine and the pestilences which will come upon us. It says the hurricane season runs from June 1st to the end of November, but the next 6 weeks, the season within a season, is regularly the most dangerous and active time for storms to develop. So again, interesting that this overlays the fall period, the September-October period, when trouble is happening in the stock markets, and this happens every single year, when trouble is happening in the Middle East, which does not happen every year necessarily at the same time, but it's going on now. with the buildup of Chinese troops on the border with Hong Kong, with the Middle East escalations, Israel hitting Iraqi cities now. Baghdad, in fact, was the latest big hit by Israel in the Middle East, and Iran doesn't like that. And so you got a lot of things converging, a lot of things layered on top of each other prophetically. Not only that, but we have the economic situation where there's signals of recession, and the stock markets are convulsing, going up and down. And we're only in the middle of August. Usually those go up and down significantly in September, October. So we're getting into this, significantly the swing of things right now. And it says the result, a big change in pattern over the Atlantic, going from a very lackluster, quiet weather pattern to a much more active one. Again, I will add, they're saying we are thinking this season will be backloaded, which means the worst is going to come in September, October, November, all lining up. All we need is what is the straw that breaks the economic back of the camel, and all we're looking for is one geopolitical event which triggers it. There's significant events, single significant events, have triggered the last two world wars. Assassination of a world leader, for example. It only takes one little event to trigger a world war or to trigger economic collapse, and we don't know what that will be, but it's building up. All right, let's look at this article about the Temple Mount here and the status quo. A spokesman for Jordanian ministry warned Tuesday that a change of the status quo on the Temple Mount would have serious consequences. The statement came in response to Israeli Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan saying during the interview Tuesday that he saw an injustice in the status quo and that we need to work to change it. And the injustice really is that Muslims have a lot more access to the Temple Mount than do Jews, and it's not fair. And the status quo is an unbalanced, unfair status quo. If you think about the people who want to go up there, the Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims, and certainly the Muslims have the most rights currently on the Temple Mount, even though Israel conquered it in 67 and took the Temple Mount. The official Petra news agency reported that Jordan rejects Erdogan's comments and had sent a letter of protest to Israel through diplomatic channels. I think there is an injustice in the status quo that has existed since 67 when they got the Temple Mount. Erdogan told Israel's Radio 90. And this is, again, you look at all these ministers saying this. These are government officials saying these things, bringing Temple Mount, bringing Third Temple into the public conscience, and continuing to keep it in the news for the Jewish people, which means that the more and more they hear about it, the more they raise the issue, the more they talk about it in the media, the more the Israeli public are really going to start pushing the government officials more and more then to get access, to build a third temple, etc. It says we need to work to change it so in the future, Jews with the help of God can pray at the Temple Mount. Remember, the Jews aren't legally allowed to pray. When they pray, of course, they rock their heads back and forth, and so the Temple Mount police can notice that, and then they shuffle them off as soon as they do that. Of course, Christians can go up there and pray at any time. We don't have any particular tradition of swaying, so a Christian can go up there and pray. He doesn't have to close his eyes. He can pray to God in Temple Mount. But of course, if you see a Jewish person up there, they're not allowed to pray. And the police will remove them if they start to pray, because the Muslims, the Arabs, will riot if they see a Jew doing that. He clarified his remarks by adding, "This needs to be achieved by diplomatic agreements and not by force," he says. Now, diplomatic agreements, immediately my mind turns towards the agreement of the Antichrist and the 7-year period, a covenant confirmed with the peoples, with the many, and part of that agreement is going to be to rebuild the third temple. I believe that's what the Antichrist is going to push forward, and it's going to be for a temporary amount of time, a 7-year period, so that they can determine the final status of Jerusalem. So they don't have to figure it out right away, but they'll have 7 years to determine final status or to come up with a final status agreement. And so I think that's what's coming. And I think when he speaks with diplomatic agreements, I believe that speaks right into end-time Bible prophecy and about the Antichrist, confirming a covenant with many for a 7-year period. As of 94, under a peace treaty brokered by Bill Clinton between Israel's Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Jordanian King Hussein, Israel recognized Jordanian custodianship of the Temple Mount and allows Islamic Waqf to ban non-Muslim worshippers during Muslim holidays. So the Waqf and Jordan generally controls it, even though Israel officially owns it by military takeover. Israel maintains security control of the sensitive holy site. It is Minister Erdogan's right to put a suggestion on the table for discussion, said Israeli Foreign Minister Yisrael Katz in an interview with Khan Radio. He didn't force it, but rather set it down. But the sovereignty is the state of Israel's. The sovereignty of the Temple Mount is Israel. So it's up to Israel to decide ultimately what to do. And if they want to deal with the reason why they don't allow it is because they don't want to deal with the riots all the time. The Arabs always riot on the Temple Mount. Israel doesn't want to deal with it, so they say, you know what, Jews, you can't pray on the Temple Mount. But pressure, and not just pressure from public. Interestingly, this pressure is coming from the public ministers, the government employees. They are the ones that are getting this frequently into the public sphere, getting it into the news, etc. It's very interesting. So the Israeli government is really the one that continues the discussion, which is kind of backwards from the way it goes in Western countries. We very much leave religion out of politics, and most politicians don't bring it in. But in Israel, it's the politicians that are pushing the religious agenda almost, and they continue to bring it up. And it's interesting. So they should, I think, in many cases. The statements come after clashes between large groups of Muslim worshippers and Israeli police on Sunday as celebrants of the Muslim Eid al-Adha holiday rioted to prevent Jews entering the Temple Mount during the Jewish fast day of Tish B'Av. So this is going to be something that in the last days is going to be bubbled to the surface, and the Antichrist figure will come in and say, look, we're gonna give everybody equal access. We're gonna allow the Jews to maybe pray on the Temple Mount. We're gonna give them their own area on the Temple Mount. We're gonna even allow them to build a temple so they can pray in the temple and only there, and not pray around the Dome of the Rock or the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And maybe that will assuage the Arabs so that they don't riot all the time. And with that agreement, like I say, they're going to rebuild that third temple. And the public appetite for this is ready to go. The Temple Institute's ready to go. The government of Israel seems ready to go. All we need is that one person, that one leader to rise into position and push this forward. So this is, I think, what's coming. And I think it's very interesting. Any day now we could see the revealing of the Antichrist figure, of this person who pushes and ends up making this deal. I believe he's in politics right now. Where is he in politics? It's hard to say exactly. There's speculation about where this Antichrist figure comes from. Does he come from the Middle East? Does he come from Europe, the European Union? Does he come from Syria? There's lots of speculation about where exactly he comes from. Is he Jewish? Is he Arab by ethnicity? So where does he come from? What does he believe? Why is he mediating this? All questions that are valid, but all speculation that I think we're going to see over the next 12 months. I think the Antichrist will be revealed over the next 12 months, and we'll have a good understanding, because that person is going to need to be rising to the top in terms of politics soon. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll continue watching the news. We'll see you guys in the next video.